You know those moments when you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, where there's no clear right answer and the so-called rules just don't seem to fit? Well, today, we're going to break down a framework that's built for exactly those messy, real-world situations. It's a tool for navigating the gray areas.
So, here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll poke some holes in the idea of a simple black and white morality. Then we'll introduce a much more flexible way of thinking with something called prima facie principles. We'll get to know the three big ones, and then we'll put it all together and see how it works with a real-life high-stakes case.
All right, let's start by looking at why thinking in rigid, absolute terms can really get us into trouble. To do that, we're going to look at a classic ethical puzzle that has tied philosophers in knots for ages.
Okay, let's just ask a simple question. Is it always wrong to lie? Now, for some thinkers, like the famous philosopher Immanuel Kant, the answer was a hard yes. He believed some moral duties are absolute, no ifs, ands, or buts. But, real life tends to throw a wrench in that kind of thinking.
And this brings us to a famous thought experiment. Imagine a murderer is at your door, and they ask you where your friend is hiding. An absolutist, someone who believes lying is always wrong, would say you have to tell the truth, even if it gets your friend killed. But come on, our intuition, our gut, just screams that saving a life is way more important here, and that conflict shows us we need a more nuanced approach.
So, if absolute rules can lead us into a corner, what's the alternative? Well, this is where a really powerful idea comes into play, the concept of prima facie principles. It's a much more flexible and, frankly, more realistic way to think about ethics.
The key idea here is a prima facie principle. Now that sounds fancy, but think of it like this. It's a default setting on your moral compass. It's a duty that's binding, it's serious, unless it's overwritten by an even more important duty in that specific situation. It's a strong guideline, not an unbreakable law.
So here's the big takeaway. Instead of having just one giant unbreakable rule, this approach, called principlism, gives us more of an ethical toolkit. We have several important principles, and the real work, the hard part of being a moral person, is learning how to weigh and balance them when they clash.
All right, so if we have this new ethical toolkit, what's actually inside? Let's take a look at the three big fundamental principles at the heart of this whole framework.
First up, we have respect, and this is a big one. It's basically the idea that every single person has inherent worth and dignity. You can't just use people like pawns on a chessboard to get what you want. They have their own goals, their own lives, and we have to honor that. Next up, number 2 is justice. This is all about fairness, right? It asks the question, are we distributing things, the good stuff like opportunities and healthcare, and the not-so-good stuff like risks and burdens, in a way that's fair to everyone? It's about equity.
And third, we have beneficence. Now this one sounds fancy, but it's actually super simple and powerful. It's our duty to do good things and, maybe even more importantly, to not cause harm. It's an active duty. It means we should prevent harm when we can, remove harm when we see it, and generally try to make the world a better place.
Okay, so we've got these three powerful principles: respect, justice, and beneficence. But how do we actually use them when things get tricky? That's where this simple, three-step framework becomes so incredibly useful. It turns these big ideas into a practical guide. And the process is actually pretty straightforward. Step 1, you just look at the situation and figure out, okay, which of my principles are clashing here? Is it respect versus beneficence? Maybe justice is in the mix? Then step 2, and this is really the key, you have to weigh them. You have to ask, in this specific situation, which duty feels heavier? Which one is more important right now? And finally, step 3 is simple. You act on that judgment.
Look, theory is one thing, but let's see how this whole thing works in the real world. We're going to use a case study from the source material to see this framework in action, and this is really where the rubber meets the road.
Okay, so here's the scenario. Picture a therapist, Dr. Samsara. During a session, her patient reveals that he has a credible plan to seriously hurt his ex-girlfriend. So now Dr. Samsara is completely stuck, right? She's got this professional duty to keep patient info secret, but also this basic human duty to stop someone from getting badly hurt.
So let's fire up our framework. Step 1. What principles are at play? Well, on one hand, you've got the duty of respect. That means respecting her patient's privacy and the confidentiality of their sessions. But on the other hand, you've got the duty of beneficence, a powerful pull to prevent someone from coming to serious, violent harm. The two are in direct conflict.
Okay, on to step 2, weighing the principles. This is where the judgment call comes in. Dr. Samsara has to put these two duties on a scale. And in this case, the duty to prevent probable, severe, life-threatening violence, well, it's just heavier. It outweighs the duty to keep a secret when a life is on the line. The threat of violence tips the scale. And that leads us right to step 3, the action. Her decision to break confidentiality and warn the ex-girlfriend was the justified choice. Why? Because it honored the moral principle that carried more weight in this very specific, very dangerous situation.
So look, this framework isn't some kind of magic 8-ball that just spits out the right answer. It's something much more valuable. It's a tool. It's a structured way for you to think through the messy, complicated choices that life throws at you. The big takeaway here isn't a new rule book to follow, it's a new compass to help you find your own way. So the next time you're facing one of those tough calls, you can ask yourself, what are my duties here? And which one matters most?
Ethics is often taught as a series of neat puzzles, but as you've seen, the reality is far messier. It is easy to be moral when the choice is between right and wrong. It is significantly harder when you are caught between two rights, like the duty to be loyal to a friend and the duty to prevent harm to a stranger. This framework isn't here to give you an easy out or a simple formula. Instead, it asks you to do the hard, uncomfortable work of critical reflection. It challenges you to stop acting on gut feelings or unexamined biases and start grounding your life in reason. When you leave today, look at the people in your life not as tools to help you get ahead, but as individuals with their own intrinsic worth and dignity. When you face a conflict this week, don't just ask what's easiest. Ask yourself what principles you are actually standing for. Your character is ultimately built on the good reasons you provide for the choices you make when no one else is looking.